Well, thank you, Cindy. And it was interesting talking to Cindy when she called. We kind of dropped communications a little bit. All of a sudden, I was like, Cindy, what do you want us to talk about? And one of the things Cindy brought up is while you're in southwestern Minnesota, you've got heavier soils, more moisture. Talk about a little bit why it won't work here and the principles. And obviously, the principles have been brought forth several times already. But so we're going to try to address what Cindy wanted. As we've gone down this journey, and it's been a long journey, like Cindy said, Dennis was there for some of our early education seminars on the farm, and he saw a lot of our struggles early on. And so we're going to go through and hopefully show you some of what not to do and educate you on a lot of the things that have worked for us in a higher rainfall environment where most all of our neighbors say it will never work. You cannot no-till in Redwood or Renville County, Minnesota. We are some of the highest production corn and soybean yields in our state. So we're located at Redwood Falls, Minnesota. You can see in this picture we're along the Minnesota River. So we are on some of the more marginal land in both counties. But we also farm south of Redwood on some of the best prairie soils left in the world. We are a cow-calf operation. We run yearlings, and we're corn, soybeans, and many other crops that we have now included in our operation. I left this in here because years ago, as I was moving up in the Minnesota State Cattlemen's, working my way up to president, we've got kind of a structured system there. It's 2 years in each position. You keep moving up. And I got to the interview process to become the president of the Cattlemen's of Minnesota. And interview process is done by past presidents. And one of them is, I call him my best friend. And his question to me was, if we allow you to move up as presidency, are you going to tell us how to farm and ranch? And I just looked at him and I said, you've never seen us present. I hope I don't tell any of you what to do on your farm and ranches. Our whole goal is to help you become more profitable by showing you what's worked for us and what hasn't. And so I just left that in there kind of. So we started in 1997. We had the opportunity to buy my parents out. My mom and dad, kind of interesting story. My dad didn't want to farm. My mom did. And they had made a commitment to each other when they got married that at age 50, they would reevaluate life. And they did. And they quit farming. Just quit. Dad jumped in a truck. My mom kept working in town. So we got the opportunity to start without that generational gap. And I mean, my dad would not give us advice on anything. But at the time, we started out with 58 cows. We'd get 3.5 months of grazing, maybe. And so I started studying grass management is where I started. I was not looking at soil health. I had no idea what we were doing to the soils. So like Glenn said yesterday, there's all kinds of different terms. We just call it adaptive managed grazing. This particular pasture we used to spray every year, like the previous speaker said. We sprayed every year. We fertilized all of it we could, and we couldn't grow grass over boot high because we were set stocking. This is what we've turned our pasture lands into now. You know, we move cows pretty much every day, or I should say 1 to 3 days. This is what we've got afterwards. That's our fertility and our herbicide program right there. Plus, now that we've understood soil health, that's also feeding the soil. This is probably no longer accurate. I do not know plant species. I know what grass is. I know what clovers are, but I don't know grasses or clovers. And the last time somebody that knew more than I was out there, we took early on, we had some documentation on this. We basically had 3 species of grass left on native pasture. It's never been plowed. And the last time somebody was out there, we had over 40 different plant species, and we know that it's way above that. So that latent seed bank did come back through our grazing management. The latent seed bank always intrigued me. I'd hear speakers talk about the latent seed bank, and I thought it was almost voodoo. How this particular picture here, that was farmed for probably 100 years. Tillage, herbicide, fertilizer, all that type of stuff. And Dawn and I just gave up on this piece of land. It sits right on the river bluff. It's a high percentage sand, a little bit of clay. And we were collecting crop insurance on it all the time, so we just seeded it to alfalfa. And then as I was learning grazing management, I grazed for what I wanted. I did not look at that alfalfa. Whoever taught me that taught me well enough that I did not watch the alfalfa. I watched the grass species that were coming. We turned this into one of the most productive pieces of land when you look at it as beef per acre, and we seeded nothing out there other than the alfalfa. We managed for what we wanted, and that was extremely hard to do when you've got alfalfa that's this tall and you're watching a grass plant that's struggling to come underneath that alfalfa. But it's a very slow process, but we did it. So as we learned that we were affecting the soil in the ground, obviously we got to the point where we're leaving way more grass than we ever used to grow in an entire season. We're seeing the natives return, which we never thought. And a lot of this is showing up on previously farmed land. It's not on our native pasture lands came back obviously very quick. But the diversity that's coming back without actually physically introducing seeds is just incredible. You can see a milkweed in the bottom of that picture even there. It's all coming back. When we started out with what I was taught. The cows came home in the winter, they went in the yard, you bedded them all winter, you hauled manure all spring and summer, and did it all again the next year. This was one of the hardest things to do because I was worried about the safety of the cows. And we figured out a system on our farm that works. We've got cedar trees, actually on a neighbor's land. That's our winter shed now. The good Lord took all of our buildings in 2011. And so then that forced us to move all the cattle out. So we do not bring cattle into yards anymore. We make sure they have plenty of protection from wind and storms. We're not quite as open out here. We don't usually get cattle to blow out in our situations. So it's worked very well for us and saved us a tremendous amount of money. Spreading manure. This is our manure spreader now. If we are feeding a mixed ration or bales or whatever, we move them. We move these bunks all the time. We made it so it's quick, easy. We can run out with a skid loader, an hour, everything's moved. The cattle are moved, the manure distribution is moved, and the neighbors call you because you're abusing your cattle. Even though they don't understand that cow's getting everything she needs and she goes to shelter when she needs to. So as we learned everything, as we were learning about soil health in our grazing system, we are 14 miles south of one of the largest sugar beet co-ops in the nation. Tremendous amount of tillage in our area. In the last 10 to 12 years, I cannot believe how fast I've witnessed the soil degradation in where we farm. I've lived here my whole life. I had never seen a dust storm until the last 10 years. Now, in the last 5 years, we consistently have dust storms, and like Dawn mentioned last night, we have dust storms just about monthly now in southwestern Minnesota. And I blame it completely on our farming practices. You know, you can go to southwestern Minnesota right now, that bottom right picture, that's what our road ditches look like. We've had two winds. We had one from the northwest at 35 miles an hour. We had one from the south the other day at 30 miles an hour. All the ditches are full of soil. And that's only two winds, and we're not through winter yet. So as we were moving through this, we adopted the principles that obviously have been spoken about, keep soil covered, which we're doing. We've been 11 full years of 100% no-till in our operation, minimize disturbance, increase diversity. This was extremely hard for us initially because we still borrow money. We had no old money in our family. Dawn and I have built what we have. So we're borrowing money, and the banker doesn't like the idea of small grains. When we're growing 200 bushel corn and 60 bushel soybeans, why do you want to plant wheat or oats or anything? So that was a process that we've worked our way through to increase the diversity in our cropland. Living roots in the soil all the time, we'll get into that. Obviously for us, it was easy to integrate the livestock. We have substantially increased the acreage that we manage right now, and we've only got 200 acres that we can't get a cow on, and we will get those fences up so we can get the cow on there. But the biggest one for us was context. We'd go to events like this, and most of the time up in Burleigh County, North Dakota for some reason, but we'd end up driving up there, and I'd come home with these ideas, but I didn't think it all the way through, or I didn't hear completely what the speaker was saying. And I was so excited about it, I just mass apply it to our farm. And at that time, we were only farming 450 acres, and we figured it out. We figured we've had about $160,000 worth of education from grants management. Mismanagement. So context is so important. If you're just new to coming into this soil health realm, or wherever you are, you have to adopt what you feel fits your operation, how you can do it financially, how you can do it with a partner or other partners in the operation so everybody's comfortable doing it. But if you're not doing this stuff, at least try, like was brought up before. Where do we start? At least start with something.
He's the speaker, but this is my slide. The neighbor and us, we farmed together occasionally, and there was a field across the road from him, and he and Grant were talking back and forth, and they said they were discussing this, and they're like, you cannot believe what was done to this field. And I'm a word nerd, and so annihilation came to my mind, and so I looked up, this is the Webster's definition of annihilation, and then of course Ray Archuleta, he has said all the time, soil is naked, hungry, thirsty, and running a fever, and that is exactly what we're seeing, across a great swath of the state of Minnesota, even up north. And I'll let Grant tell you the story of that field.
And the reason we kept this in here is because I've traveled this state for 35 plus years. I used to drive truck, and we come out to stock show all the time. We got friends out here. This is moving west very rapidly. I noticed it on the drive out that it moved even farther west. This was corn stubble the year before. John Deere chopping corn head, disc gripper, we thought it was okay. This is going to sugar beets the next year. All of a sudden they come in with a Wishick disc buried to the spools 2 times over it. Then they came with anhydrous for some reason, going to sugar beets. I didn't quite get that one. And then they came with a field cultivator with rolling baskets on it. That's what it looks like. Completely annihilated anything that could possibly be there. Dwayne Beck has done all kinds of research on this and others. Tillage tools destroy soil structure, reduce water infiltration, reduce organic matter, increase weed populations. In our area where we farm, the high-speed disc and vertical tillage is coming into our area. I thought that was great until I talked to Dwayne, and he told me 1 inch cuts water infiltration, 1 pass, by half. And we're starting to see that show up also. We kept this in here because of how quickly things can change. The guy on the left no-tilled the spring of 2019. The guy on the right moldboard plows every year. The guy on the right got less than 60% of his soybeans combined on 3 different attempts with very large machines. The guy on the left combined 100% of his soybeans after 2.8 inches more rainfall. So soils will change quickly when you adopt the practices. This is what I noticed as I was coming west the other day. The tiling that's starting to happen in this state, and it's moving farther and farther west. I would say we are the tiling capital of the world. We are 20 miles south of one of the largest tile manufacturers in the world. The tiling you see there is on 75-foot centers that's just been put in. That's splitting the already in place 75-foot structures that were in there. Alan Williams was with me when they got done with this, and he said, they're placing a Band-Aid on a gushing wound. We don't have a drainage problem. We have an infiltration problem. Even after this tiling was done, they still wrecked a brand new 670 John Deere combine out there. Twisted her, never to go to the field again. So I was so proud of our grazing management, how I had groomed our creeks and streams into something that was nice and wide, fully vegetated. And I thought we were pretty much immune to flooding anymore until you get all that tile line coming at you. So you can see what we had in 2017. That was after a 8 or 9 inch rain in 2017. But in 2018, we had got just about a 13-incher in 12 hours, and that's what it did to our pastures. And I just keep this in here because we get so much push in agriculture from our city cousins. Why are you doing this to us? Just imagine the amount of topsoil that ended up down in Lake Pepin, because we're on the Minnesota River watershed. This stream comes off of our land, goes right into that cut in that creek is 6 to 8 feet deep. It's 1.5 miles long through our property alone. Imagine the truckloads that it took of soil off of our creek banks. This is another part of our city cousins getting upset with us. There's a small community, a few newer houses in there. One of our friends that works at the FSA office lives in that house. And December 23rd, we had a blizzard warning and an air quality alert at the same time. How does that happen? And it was because of the massive amount of topsoil moving in southwestern Minnesota. And the results of this, I'll just briefly go over it, but the county ended up cleaning out 1.5 miles of road ditch. I talked to the county engineer. He told me how many tandems and pups they hauled out of there. When you do the math of what they just hauled out of the road ditch was 6.5 tons of the acre on that 320-acre field. That was just what landed in that road ditch. And you know how they didn't clean all the soil out of that road ditch because of the grass. So, but this is the biggest thing. None of the soil health principles were followed on this field the year before. It was edible beans. They don't leave much stubble, no cover crop after it, full disc grip or tillage, 2 passes of spring tillage, and look at that corn crop. There is nothing left of the principles of soil health to support that corn plant. This particular field did not get combined. Imagine the expense and the crop insurance. Obviously, there's all kinds of different cover crops to use and ways to use them, but this particular slide I left in here because this was a road construction area along a county road, and we watched the neighbors go through with their deep tillers and rippers, and Dawn and I said, nope, we're just going to cover crop this. We'll take it for hay and forage, reseed cover crops in there, and see if we can fix it with cover crops and root structures. You can see in both pictures, but the picture on the right, that was completely disturbed by road equipment, and we have rebuilt 17 inches of coal black topsoil through those cover crops. You know how road construction is. They leave you 2 or 3 inches of somewhat black topsoil. The part that impresses my father the most about this is most of our farmland is classified hell land, so it's quite sloped land. When we took over, all of our hills were yellow clay. We now have 6 to 12, as much as 14 inches of black topsoil on all the hills. It took time, but we've rebuilt it. In a drought, we now get crops producing over the top of our hills. We've tried to do everything we can to keep a living root in the system at all times. This is one of our things that has not worked the last 2 years, but adapted no-till drills and seeded covers in between the corn crop. On the left, that's too late to do it. You need to do it when it's on the right or farther. A lot of talk in the soil health world about cover crops. And the previous speaker said, well, you don't have to put in 40 different species, but I do highly encourage to put in more than one. When we started down this path, all we used was turnips. They were great, but we had erosion just like when we were still moldboard plowing because there was no grass species or there was no residue left to hold the soils. Pretty much inside here is single species, or Dawn and I were talking about this. Some of these might be 3 or 4 species mixes, but you can see how they all failed somewhere in there except for the 100% buckwheat on the left. But the outside of this plot is Dawn needed the shed cleaned out, got the grinder mixer out. We're guessing there's 40 to 50 species in the outside there. It all got thrown in the grinder mixer, every partial bag that was there, and seeded, and we had 100% coverage and growth in there, and this is where we store bales. So this is our bale yard that we just seeded, so we had something in there. Massive compaction, so the more species, the better. This just kind of shows you why the larger seeds will push through, help the smaller seeds get through. They don't all make it. The one thing we've learned on this journey is timing is huge. As soon as we harvest a crop, we try to have our drill running right behind there if we need to get a cover crop seeded. This was Grant working late at night, no monitors on a drill, dropped the chain September 20th. Was coming home along the highway, saw these strips out there finally December 15th. We were finishing up seeding rye. I went out and seeded it. It's 2 bushels an acre in both strips, same rye, same drill, everything the same, but look at the difference in the spring growth by getting those covers in as soon as you possibly can. In our area, we're corn soybeans. our neighbors say you can't add a third grain in, or a small grain in there, especially. I was forced to do this math by a neighbor, and I'm not going to dwell on it a lot, but 2 years ago in the economics we were in, we can see by not looking January to January 1 like the banker does, but look long term, we can see a total net gain of about another $352 an acre in cattle feed. Reduced inputs is huge. We can reduce our fertility program on our corn. We can reduce our herbicide. And it has also allowed us, by adding a third crop into our rotation, we do not use any genetically modified traits anymore because we don't need them. We've broke the pest cycles. This is what a very successful cover crop looks like following wheat. Tremendous amount of cattle feed. That type of cover crop has also allowed us to plant green. We try to plant all of our corn and soybeans green. When I started down this path, there was a lot of talk about allelopathic effect, all the different things. This is 2019, the extremely wet year. This is the last field of corn we're planting. Yes, that rye is heading. But there's a tremendous amount of hairy vetch underneath there and clovers. So we're trying to balance the carbon-nitrogen ratio correctly, but we also learned that we needed to front load more nitrogen so that corn could make up the carbon-nitrogen imbalance we have going on there. This is not ideal, but we did grow a tremendous corn crop by doing this. Not going to go into this, but I kept this in here because what we've learned on this journey is as the soil health improved, the nutrient density of all the crops that we raise keep increasing. The last time I figured it out, we're adding about $47 an acre more to our corn in crude protein. We used to feed all of our corn through our feedlot. Instead of feeding 6 and 7% crude protein corn, we were feeding 10 to 12% crude protein corn. That's real numbers coming back out of that cattle system. Hopefully someday they'll pay us for that as we deliver it to ethanol plants or wherever our end market is. All of our soybeans get planted green. This particular case, we actually had to graze this twice because we didn't have pastures coming in a cool spring where the grasses weren't coming fast enough to get the cows out to calve on, so we calved out here and then planted soybeans. Still a very respectable crop. Once again, this is just in here to remind me, it's taken Dawn and I 5 years to prove ourselves with 2 different food grade soybean companies. We consistently, on our home farm and farms that we've had in these practices for several years, we consistently have the highest oil content and highest protein content. They test this stuff coming in from all the different producers. We are currently getting $4 a bushel over Chicago for our soybeans, and they're paying the freight. And we're normally a negative 90-cent basis. So we're talking just about $6 a bushel premium we're getting for these soybeans. Do these food-grade soybeans yield a little bit less, but the net is still tremendous. So this is our fall tillage pass now. I happened to get to the field in time to catch the crew going and got up on a hill and got this. Son-in-law's drilling right behind the combine, the grain cart going. That's how important that living root is to us in the soil all the time. We probably, this field, I know we didn't even see really any visible growth until you went out there and looked because it was so late in the season. This was one of the last fields, but that's how important it is to get it done. Diversity is a beautiful thing. We got blessed to get into on some studies on this. However you can add more diversity. If you're new to this, start slowly. We currently now don't plant any cover crops, full season cover crops with less than 9 species. If you're still running a drill, there's calibration calculators out there to help you get it a lot closer so you don't have a massive seed expense by some type of mistake you made. But we've also diversified our operation on the livestock side of it. We added the laying hens for our daughter and son-in-law and broilers, and I added the pasture-raised pork. It's just added many different income streams for us. Some of them have gone away. Some of them stay, depending on the labor force and the demand we have. But this is one thing that when we started the egg laying part of the operation, we had customers. We had an overflow of eggs, and we found a customer that would buy our overflow, and her comment was, "I'll buy all the eggs you can produce, all of them." And she meant hundreds of dozens a week. "I'll buy them all as long as you get the soy out of them," because her customers didn't want soybean meal in the eggs. And I thought, well, here we've got to figure this out. So we plant 7 different grains all at the same time. We harvest them all at the same time. We have to windrow them because flax will be the last one to dry down. And we pick it up with a windrow head and combine it. But this diversity in this mix is 100% of our poultry feed now, and it's half of our hog feed right now. So we're not buying any outside proteins off the farm to produce these livestock that take higher protein requirements. The cool thing about this is it's off early. We can get a diverse cover crop in there for late season grazing for the cattle. The diversity of insects has come back on our farm. A lot of talk of that all the time in the news with the neonics and that type of stuff. We do not use any seed treatments or insecticides of any kind on our place. And obviously Jonathan Lundgren here in the state has done a lot of studies on this, and he always says it to me when I see him: no bees, no plants, no people. The diversity of livestock that's come back to our farm that we don't own is incredible. When I was a kid, we used to obviously have more diversity in our farming operation, and we would house between 60 and 70 deer a winter on our home farm. When Dawn and I met, we'd be so excited if we'd see 2 to 4 deer an entire winter. Last winter with 100 inches of snow and all of our cover crops and no-till and stockpiled forages in the pasture, on 1,200 acres in the river bottom, we were running between 600 and 900 head of white-tailed deer. It's that population is not good. It is very hard to keep stored feeds around unless you have 3 great big monster dogs that like chasing deer off. But one of our early teachers was Ian Mitchell Innes, and he always said, if you build it, they will come, and then charge the hell out of them for it. And so this is one of the things that's opened up for us. You know, we can now house a tremendous amount of deer hunters for all the different deer hunting seasons we have. And we've got birders that come out. It's just opened up so much diversity and so many different options if we have time to accomplish it. So it can't be done here. The cover crops take nutrients and water from the cash crop. We've proven that wrong, although cereal rye in front of soybeans, you got to manage that. They will take water away. You got to terminate when the weather conditions say you need to. Our soil temperatures don't warm up quickly enough. That's the biggest excuse we get in southwest Minnesota why we can't go to no-till. Dawn documented this. Our soils are 24 hours a day consistently warmer than black soils. It won't work on my farm, my soil. We've got one field that we go through 7 different soil types in one pass. It works in all those different soil types. Growing season isn't long enough. Obviously, northern climate is short, but there's lots of data that shows just a small growth in the fall does a tremendous amount of good work. Don't have the right equipment. Farmers are geniuses when it comes to designing equipment or building their own, and obviously now we got manufacturers building it for us. Don't have the livestock, therefore it won't work. We've got 2 neighbors in our community that have done this without livestock. They won't allow livestock to go across their land, and they have changed their soil health. My landlord wants to see black dirt in off-season. We hear this a lot in our community. I just say that you need to educate the landlord. Some of them won't take the education, but so over the years of doing this, we realized that this is strictly about education. I didn't know what I didn't know. I had to go find the people to get the education. So now Dawn and I have opened up our farm and ranching operation. We try to teach as many as we can in a year.
So he's obviously the speaker in the family, but this spot is on our farm, and we actually held a family wedding there one time. But this is a spot that I go to when I need some peace. And so I wrote this, and I'll read it to you, and it's why this slide means so much. I read somewhere recently that we are responsible for finding the balance between God, nature, and people. Glenn Elzinga mentioned in his talk that while he can't see the good things in the soil, he knows they're there. That statement brought these Bible verses to mind. As Grant and I have followed this path that God has put us on, we have grown in faith as well as knowledge. The Lord created a perfect world and a perfect balance, and we humans haven't done well in keeping that balance. We are learning where we fit in our ecosystems that we're part of to find ways to repair the damage caused over the last 150 years. We want to grow a legacy that generations to come can continue to build on, enjoy, and learn from. We thank God for this journey.
So with that, we had titled it Farmers of Life for Life. Will you become farmers of life for life? It's just amazing to go out and see what we can promote and grow and encourage to live on our farms and ranches if we change the way we manage. With that, thank you. The question is, what's the green crop in front of our soybeans? It's usually just cereal rye because we're seeding it after corn harvest and we get pretty late with corn harvest. The question is, do we put rye in front of corn? We do all the time. We have figured out that we are incorrect in our carbon to nitrogen ratios, so therefore we move our June nitrogen application to it goes on with the planter, so we don't short that corn crop of nitrogen.
You ever interseed corn at V4?
Do we interseed corn at V4? We will start, if we were going to interseed corn, we start at V2. Yeah, we just firmly believe we're 30-inch rows yet. A lot of our neighbors are 22s, and our neighbors with 22s are the ones that taught us that. They start at V2, and they're making interseeding work with adequate moisture. The last 2 years we've been so dry, none of the interseeding has made it. It's just been too dry. It dies underneath the canopy of the corn. But yeah, for us, we like to be all done by V5. Get that crop started so it gets enough growth so it can take that 60 days of darkness. What are we interseeding? Usually 9 pounds of annual rye and less than 1.5 pounds of brassicas. So turnip, radish, and some kale or rape. Keeps it cheap. Yeah, cheap. We like cheap. Because like the last 2 years, it didn't work out. So, we were out our time and our seed costs. So.
One of the things that Andy Breitkreutz, the reason it works so well, they get it started early. It's storming.
Yes, and we've even seen it with the brassica side of it. You want some growth on them so they got some life in their system to take that time of darkness, because it is really dark for 60 days in that cornfield. No, they're not, and I forgot to look that up. But we use the same concoction, the same percentages each year, and we've done this for 5 years. Never, ever of those 5 years has that looked the same coming out of the combine. It is. We finally figured out to save 2 years. We've got 2 years of jars of it sitting on the shelf at home. And those 2 years, these last 2 years, look nothing like the 3 years previous to it. And it's all seeded. It all comes from the same seed company, same percentages, but given the moisture, humidity, temperatures, it's just incredible what it looks like coming in the grain tank when you go to combine it. And it's been running between 19 and 26% crude protein, depending on the year, depending on which species flourish.